It has been 24 hours since the Israeli Air Force launched a military strike on the Iranian mainland, and the details of the attack are gradually becoming clear. First of all, the Israeli Air Force released some videos and photos of the airstrikes against Iran. It can be seen from them that the Israeli Air Force dispatched F-15Ds of the 133rd Squadron and F-16s of the 253rd Squadron to participate in the war. Of course, it also definitely included F-35s of a certain squadron at the Nevatim Air Force Base. Even if the total number of troops dispatched is not more than 100, including fighter jets and support forces, there must be 40 to 50 aircraft, just as the Israeli military boasted. This is indeed an air campaign operation of an unprecedented scale. From the strike configuration and attack route of the participating aircraft models, I find it rather interesting. In terms of the strike configuration of the participating aircraft, the Israeli army itself has published some pictures of F-15ID and F-16ID fighters being prepared for and taking off in the form of photos and videos. Judging from the photos released by the Israeli army, the participating F-15D fighters are equipped with 3 auxiliary fuel tanks, with 1 Python 450's close-range combat missile mounted under the wing, and 1 AIM-7M Sparrow air-to-air missile, 2 AIM-120C air-to-air missiles and 1 forward-looking infrared pod mounted under the fuselage. This is a typical air superiority loadout. Presumably, it is on an escort mission, which is nothing remarkable. When performing this mission, the F-15ID fighter can maintain an operational radius of over 1000 kilometers without any problem. However, the participating F-16ID fighters are being rather coy. I have viewed both the photos and videos taken by the Israeli military themselves, and only the 3 auxiliary fuel tanks under the wings and fuselage are shown in the frames, while the combat payload under the wings has been deliberately or inadvertently overlooked. Since it has been overlooked, there must be something to it, considering that the F-15ID fighters are tasked with the escort mission and no opposing target loadout has been found so far. And combined with the fact that the Israeli Air Force has always used the F-16ID fighters as typical opposing target strike aircraft models and integrated a large number of opposing target strike means, I believe that the main force of the missile strike carried out by the Israeli military on the Iranian mainland in the early morning of October 26 was the F-16I fighters. As for what the real strike means of the Israeli Air Force is, in fact, there are also clues. Also yesterday, someone in northern Iraq picked up the debris of a fallen air-launched ballistic missile body. Again, we all know that among the air-launched ballistic missiles of the Israeli military, the most famous one is the Sparrow series of air-launched ballistic missiles. The Sparrow series was originally developed as a target missile for the Israeli military. It can simulate different types of ballistic missile targets, from Scud to Iran's Meteor 3 missiles, for the Arrow to Thirds interceptor missiles to conduct interception training. Later, it was also used by the Israeli military as an opposing target attack weapon. However, judging from the appearance of the Sparrow series of air-launched ballistic missiles, this series of air-launched ballistic missiles has relatively small tail fin areas and relatively large tail fin inclinations, which do not match the shape of the fallen missile's tail fin. Obviously, what the Israeli military fired might not be the typical Sparrow series. The shape of this tail fin is more like that of the Rock air-launched ballistic missile. At the same time, the tail fin actuation mechanism of the Rock air-launched ballistic missile also has a small fairing design, and this fairing feature is also reflected on the fallen tail fin wreckage. This makes me inclined to think that the air-launched ballistic missile used by the Israeli Air Force to attack Iran this time is the Rock missile. Analyzing from the technical and tactical performance of the Rock ballistic missile, this missile was developed by Rafael Company and first appeared at the Defense Exhibition in 2019. The main technical data are unknown, but judging from its appearance, the outside world believes that its range is over 500 kilometers and the maximum speed is 4 to 5 times the speed of sound. The overall technical and tactical performance is relatively similar to that of the CM400 AKG Erla, Unched ballistic missile developed by us for the FC-1 Xiaolong fighter for foreign trade equipment. However, the difference is that the Rock-Air launched ballistic missile can choose either the self-guidance mode or the man-in-the-loop guidance mode. The guidance head is not the common monopulse radar seeker but an infrared imaging seeker. It is said that an anti-radiation seeker can also be selected for multi-mode guidance. The circular error probable of the missile is only 3 meters. And it is rumored that the warhead also has a certain penetration capability. From the perspective of the tactical requirements of the Israeli Air Force's air offensive, the Israeli military indeed needs a standoff attack weapon that can be launched outside the defense zone and strike Iranian targets without entering Iranian airspace. And this weapon should have a certain ability to precisely strike point targets, so as not to deviate a long distance after being launched. Therefore, considering comprehensively, the air-launched ballistic missile body that fell in northern Iraq indicates that the Israeli military may not have used the typical Sparrow series of air-launched ballistic missiles, but the new Rock-Air launched ballistic missile, the standoff attack, long-range precision guidance, multi-mode guidance and other performances of the Rock series of air-launched ballistic missiles are also what the Israeli Air Force needs. So, my final conclusion is that in the strike carried out by the Israeli military against Iran in the early morning of October 26, although multiple opposite-side attack weapons may have been used, among them, the Rock-Air launched ballistic missile should have played a relatively key role and is a relatively important strike means relied on by the Israeli Air Force. The strike means is clear. So what about the attack route? The Israeli military may have taken off from 3 air bases in the north, middle and south, completed assembly and formation over Jordanian airspace, and then maintain low-altitude flight along the border between Jordan and Syria to avoid the air defense system of the Russian Aerospace Forces and the Syrian Arab Republic Army in Damascus and enter the relatively weakly defended western Iraq. Finally, ballistic missiles were launched over the Kurdish region in northern Iraq and Erbil province. Here, it is less than 500 kilometers away from Iran's Al-Alam province, more than 600 kilometers away from Avaz, and 700 kilometers away from Tehran. It is suitable to launch attacks using both the Rock missile and the Sparrow missile. So what is the air offensive tactic of the Israeli Air Force? Was the Israeli air offensive successful? I think it's hard to say. In fact, from the tactics of the Israeli air offensive yesterday, and the after effects of the strike, we can probably estimate the campaign goals and tactical intentions of the Israeli Air Force. In simple terms, it is 2 sentences. First, open an offensive gap, and then launch air-launched ballistic missiles to strike important targets in Tehran, the capital of Iran, if viewed from the perspective of organizing an air offensive. Striking the air situation awareness system in the border areas of Iran is indeed beneficial for the subsequent implementation of penetrating offense and striking targets in Tehran, and also conducive to the possible direct penetration of the Israeli stealth fighter fleet. However, the Israeli military did not strike the air situation awareness systems of the 3 provinces of West Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, and Kermanshah on the offensive axis, but instead deviated to strike the air defense systems of Khs Estan and Ilam, provinces that were not on the front of the offensive. Which is somewhat puzzling. Let me try to explain. Perhaps the Israeli military did attack, but because the Iranian air defense system on the front of the main offensive axis of the Israeli military is relatively tight. The Israeli military's attacks on the air defense systems of the 3 provinces of West Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, and Kermanshah were generally not very successful. On the contrary, in ILA-MNKH's eastern provinces on the flank of the campaign. Iran thought it was unlikely that the Israeli military would come from this side, and the defense was relatively weak. As a result, the Israeli Air Force took the opportunity to attack the air defense radar sites after all. The tactical intention of the Israeli aircraft fleet to suppress the air defense system on the offensive axis is to open an offensive channel for the subsequent aircraft fleet to break through. However, in the case that the suppression in the early stage seems to be unsuccessful, the subsequent aircraft fleet cannot break in. Otherwise, the losses would be completely uncontrollable. In case there are ground-to-air missiles guided by resurrected air defense radar stations, Israel would be unable to end it after weighing the pros and cons. The Israeli Air Force may have activated a backup plan and forcibly launched the standoff attack means of air-launched ballistic missiles to strike targets in Tehran. The targets of the strike do not seem to be targets in the urban area of Tehran, but the tactical missile factory in the Shamsabad industrial area about 40 kilometers outside Tehran. This is why there was no noise heard in Tehran at present. It is confirmed that at least 1 to 2 air-launched ballistic missiles have indeed caused certain damage to the industrial area factories in Shamsabad, which also proves that the forced assault carried out by the Israeli Air Force this time did have results. But whether plan of the Israeli military is like this, and whether there is an intention such as the F-35I fleet forcibly breaking in to carry out large-scale bombing is not very clear therefore. Regarding the Israeli air raid on Iran on October 26, I think it was generally a bit strange, including attacking the radar positions in ILA-MNKH's eastern provinces, and dispatching the F-35I fighter in a clean configuration that was later nowhere to be found, etc. All seem to indicate that the Israeli Air Force fought a half-baked battle. The losses caused to Iran are not too great. But if you say there is no result at all, that is also not the truth. So, next we will see how Iran plays its cards.